Next, we're going to do the legal notice, and this will be for hot work permits. If we could all stand and rise for the pledge. Hillary, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In a moment of silence for the men and women in the armed forces, our first responders and veterans, those that are fighting the good fight in the Ukraine, and those 3 individuals and their families. The 3 individuals lost their lives in the Virginia shooting. Thank you. This next one is a legal notice. Please take notice that pursuant to sections 405, 406 of the Town Charter, the Milford Town Council will hold a public hearing to hear public comment relating to the following proposed ordinance. Hot work permits. It is proposed that the ordinance be added to the New Milford Code of Ordinances as authorized by Charter sections 405, 406, and Chapter 98 of the General Statutes. A copy of the proposed ordinance is on file in the town clerk's office and available for examination. Said hearing shall be held Monday, November 14th at 6:45 in the E. Paul Martin Room, 2nd floor, Town Hall, 10 Main Street, New Milford, Connecticut 06776, dated this 4th day of November 2022 at New Milford, Connecticut. And to read the hot work permit ordinance, Section 5B-24, hot work permit required and permit fee. Any non-residential building work activity, including new construction, renovations, demolition, addition, roofing, plumbing, steel fabrication, and the like involving hot work as set forth in the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, Standard 51B, NFPA 1, Chapter 41, as is amended, shall require a permit issued by the New Milford Fire Marshal pursuant to an application on the form furnished by the Fire Marshal and the following Fire Marshal inspection before commencing work. The fee for a hot work permit shall be $50. Section 5B-24A, hot work defined. Hot work is any activity or process that involves open flames or that generates sparks or heat and includes but not limited to welding and allied processes, heat treating, grinding, thawing pipes, powder-driven fasteners, hot riveting, torch-applied roofing, pipe sweating, and any similar applications producing or using sparks, flame, or heat. 5B-24B, inspections, work standards, and fire watch. Permittees must schedule an inspection of the subject premises before beginning hot work and must employ a fire watch. All hot work and fire watch activities must be conducted in compliance with and conformity to NFPA 51B and NFPA 1, Chapter 41, standard as amended and adopted by the state of Connecticut. 5B-24C, hours of hot work, duration of permit. Hot work activity may only be conducted between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., Monday through Friday, excluding holidays. Hot work permits are valid from the date of issuance through 6 p.m. Friday of the same week of issuance. Hot work outside the above defined parameters must not be undertaken without express prior approval of the fire marshal. 5B-24D, enforcement, appeal. Any persons or firm that violates the provisions of this ordinance shall be issued a notice of violation and assessed a civil penalty of $200 per day for each day the violation continues. A violation may be appealed pursuant to the provisions of Connecticut General Statutes 7-152C. And before we have public comments out, I'd like to ask our fire marshal, Kevin Reynolds, to come up and explain to the public and to the council the reasons stated that he believes and I believe that we need a hot work ordinance. And Kevin, before we start, I know there was some conjecture about, does the town really need this? Kevin, are you aware that Litchfield School had a fire?
Yes.
And do you know anything about that fire in Litchfield?
All I know is it was on the roof, and from what I heard, I did not talk to any official up there, that it was caused by a torching process.
So we had another school roof that caught on fire due to hot work. That's kind of right up the road from our town.
Right.
And Kevin, as our fire marshal, do you believe this is something that we need to do?
I believe, yes, it is something we should definitely do to protect the assets of the town and the businesses in this town.
And Kevin, there's been some conjecture like, I'm at my house and, I'm doing a little work in my own house. Does this apply to residential?
Absolutely not.
Only for commercial, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Kevin. Sal, do we have any comments or any public?
Mr. Sanella? Withdrawn. Ms. Thomas, I know he's sitting there.
You know where
Exactly.
that should go up there.
You just go up there.
Why didn't
Oh,
It can be next
let
to
me
me.
sit down.
Thank you. Alexandra Thomas, 187 Aspetuck Ridge Road. Thank you. I am always in support of our fire marshal. There's no doubt about that. I have some concerns, though, about the verbiage used. You, Mr. Mayor, you just spoke to commercial, and this says non-residential. So I'm worried about the definition because I want to be sure that where people live in multi-unit housing, they're protected as much as our children in our schools with regard to hot work use. So I'm a little worried about that. So just want to mention that. And I was curious to know whether we had any other hot work fires in New Milford other than the two on our high school roof. And since this came to light as a result of our high school, I hope we get to hear very soon from the fire marshal the report about the fire in the summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy, could I ask you to opine on Councilwoman's questions?
Certainly. The reason, first of all, I drafted that statute, essentially, I didn't lift it, I drafted it, because the ones that I looked at were, in my opinion, my experience, inadequate. The reason I did commercial is to avoid the plumber sweating a pipe on a water heater. That's why it was done. And I didn't find any other ordinances that had been drafted related to residential property. The fire marshal instructed me to make sure that I limited this to commercial property, and that's what I did. It was drafted again, essentially from scratch. So the reality is that the blending of OSHA regulations and the blending of NFPA regulations is something that had to be done in order to craft this ordinance, and that's where it came from. Those are not, by the way, those are not necessarily compatible pieces of legislation. But it does what the fire marshal asked me to do, and I believe it's clearly lawful, and I think it's enforceable.
Thank you, Randy. And to the fire marshal, Fire Marshal Reynolds, what do you deem commercial when it comes to multifamily properties?
Multifamily properties are, as far as our jurisdiction goes, 3 family or more. So when we're not going, if they're going to go, a plumber's going to go in and sweat a pipe in Willow Springs, we're not going to get involved with that. That's going to fall onto the plumber himself. This is going to be for Big Y, all the town buildings, any commercial building that's out there.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions for Kevin? Chris?
This is just a clarification. So first of all, Fire Marshal Reynolds, thank you for the work you and Randy did on this. And I think you clarified this in the original council meeting, but just for the purposes of the public tonight, this only applies to construction, renovation, repair projects in commercial buildings. It does not apply to businesses in town that use welding routinely, like body shops and that sort of thing.
No, because they have safeguards in place already in the daily aspects of their business.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Kate?
Attorney DeBella. You had commented on our last meeting when we discussed this a little bit that when you were researching to see what other towns had an ordinance like this, and I believe your comment was many of those that did not, but many of your colleagues said But it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, that was an
That was what
interesting,
you said?
interesting discussions.
Because it's
So-
a protective device or arm of whatever policy we have, correct?
It's a good preventative measure. And again, these are municipal lawyers talking, and the municipal lawyers are constantly in contact with CIRMA. CIRMA is the largest
Right.
insuring entity in the state.
And they insure our town.
And they insure New Milford too. They insure 148 of them. But in any event, I think 148. But in any event, the very few of these exist. Some of them do, but many of them are also inartfully drafted. So the reality is that this is essentially this is a preventative measure that enforces a fire watch and requires a contractor to meet our fire marshal.
And a fire watch is, if Kevin can just make sure I'm saying this right, a fire watch means they have a person who's actually watching the project to be sure that what happened to us doesn't happen, right?
And part of the fire watch, the proper extinguishing equipment there, and they have to read and understand the NFPA 51.
Does the size of the job determine if there's more than one fire watcher?
Absolutely. If there's in the books, the NFPA 1,
Right.
NFPA 51, it says so many square feet and how many people are needed, so.
So the NFP, as you said, Randy, sometimes those two things that were kind of combined, there are all of the pluses from each side to be sure that we've covered as many possible things as we can to be preventative.
Yeah, I've incorporated NFPA 51.8, I think, into the ordinance. So the reality is that sets the standard. So there's a definable and articulable standard, and there's something that the fire marshal can see, and there's a pre-work inspection. That's a big feature.
Spells it right out.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
pretty explicit.
Thank you.
And I think it's great we're leading the way and that this is a preventative and, preventative looking forward, a remedy in a way of the fire on the roof. It feels like the right thing because that was such a horrific event. But what I'm worried about is that we haven't, leading the way can also mean we don't have the ability to see other towns losing developers coming into the town because this is prohibitive. Do you see what I mean? We've talked about this a little bit, but I'd like to know if any small towns have done it, that they've all said we're the first to do such a thing.
No, nobody has discussed that. As a matter of fact, that's a policy issue. It's not a legal one.
Okay.
So lawyers really don't talk about that stuff because that's really the legislative determination. Nobody even mentioned it. I've talked to 4 or 5 of these, well, more than that actually, concerning this.
I was hoping we'd hear from some developers tonight coming in if there were any concerns like, oh, this would be, this looks really daunting. But, so I don't know. It's just something I worry that we'll see in a year.
And I'm sorry, Kate.
I was just gonna say, well, do you think the fact that they're not, we've seen people over the months here that come out to speak pro or against, that there aren't any here, and I believe that the contractor who was involved in the fire at the high school would be I know how he feels about what happened. It was an error, and he's been great through the whole thing. He lost his job. I think we could probably ask him, but I guess I don't understand how you see it as prohibitive. I'm not saying it isn't. But we don't have anybody here talking about that. Hey, you want to mute there, Tom? Doug, whoever?
Oh, it's a back.
You'd only need to hear me once. You don't need to hear me twice. So I'm not negating what you're saying. I just would say the same, that there aren't any contractors here to say, gee, I wish this was part of what we do every day, or I wish it wasn't going to be. So I think, I don't know what to think. I say it's not that big a deal for them.
And what is, if in a year we see we've lost some jobs or something, it can be revisited or?
Absolutely. You can always change the ordinance. Correct, Randy?
Oh, absolutely.
So that's a good point. So if this goes into effect and we hear from contractors, I'd really like to come work in your town, but then we take it up again. Isn't that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Although
You heard it
I
here.
would suggest that if we have contractors that say, I don't want to work in your town because I don't want to do a fire watch, I would I would
question
say,
that.
okay, you go
That
find
would
another
be
town
up
to
to
work in.
Kevin, our
Correct.
fire marshal,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
Yeah, and I understand your point. If someone doesn't want to be safe when they come into this town, we probably don't want them here. That's how I look at that. But that's my opinion. I understand where you're coming with that, but it don't make sense if you're gonna come here and not want to follow the rules. Especially with that.
We could realizing that there may be objections or pro comments that we haven't even thought of, which would come out in that case. And then we'd have to judge it as it lays, right?
I have a question.
Sal?
So, Mayor and Kevin, so last time we talked, we said that it's not going to be a showstopper in terms of money. It's not going to be fee for like $5,000 to get that thing going, right? What we're talking about,
200.
I don't want to put the numbers, but much less than that.
$50.
Precisely. So that shouldn't be a showstopper to start a job. If that's the problem, then you get a problem, bigger problem than just that.
And that $50 is just something that most of our fees are.
Yep.
And it wouldn't even cover mine or the deputy's time to go out and do the inspection and do the paperwork and do the follow-up with it. To
Understood.
me, it's,
So the $50 fee shouldn't be a showstopper for any developer.
I hope not.
Precisely.
If it is, that's a big problem.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that the $50 is the showstopper, it's that the constant cost and worry of having a watcher. If you're doing hot work, I don't know how much hot work is done if you're building a building or, a huge building. I'm not a developer, I don't know, but.
It's, as Kevin would tell you, it's not a lot.
Right, so it's not the $50 fee, it's the oversight and the hoops that they're jumping through. I agree, I think it's, safety before everything else.
Any other questions from the council? I'd like to entertain a motion to close.
So moved?
Second. All those in favor?
I
Opposed? Thank you.